Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the TechWolf Podcast. Today I want to welcome Kason Morris. Kason is the Global Director of the Future of Work and Skill-Based Organization Strategy at Merck. He has also worked at Allstate and Salesforce on topics related to skills, learning and talent mobility. With nearly 2 decades of leadership in corporate spheres, he has dedicated his career to reimagining how we approach work and personal fulfillment. Kason is also a LinkedIn top voice on anything regarding future of work and talent strategy, and the author of Life Work Revolution, a book that provides actionable strategies for navigating career transitions, fostering personal growth, and building systems that integrate purposeful fulfillment and success. I'm fortunate enough today to speak to Kason face-to-face, which is what we prefer, right?
Yep.
Here today in the New York Times building, more specifically in the Flanders House. Welcome, Kason. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, and it's always great to talk about these topics and in this day and age of work. So
100%.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you too. I'd love to start off with actually a question from the previous episode that we recorded.
Okay.
We talk about skills on these podcasts, about skill-based organization, what it is, what it isn't.
Yep.
And we went in a deep discussion last time around the value, how we communicate it to the business, etc., which will be more of the same today as well. But my guest last time, and this was Sarah Grechko, from the head of talent of PayPal, was curious to ask you, what if we have it wrong? What if the focus of skills is wrong? And if we put a lot of time and energy into it for not a lot of returns? What might we be overlooking that would be a better use of our time?
It's a very, very interesting question. When I think about it, is I don't think you can be wrong in this era of change. I mean, the thing that's happening in the world of work is that changes are only constant. And previously, it may have taken a lot of resources and a lot of effort to invest in the idea of skills and competencies. But now with emerging technologies, generative AI, and those other kinds of solutions, I feel like we're nearing a world where you'll be able to course correct, especially when you lead from the lens of thinking about your data, because this isn't a skills problem, it's really a data opportunity. And when you think about, 10, 15, 20 years ago, that era of digital transformation, it took a lot of companies a very long time to normalize those kinds of ideas. So I think if you're patient with the process and you understand your priorities around skills, and you start thinking about skills from the business lens and the value that it provides, I think you'll be able to course correct. And I also think in comparison to the age of digital transformation, that this era of intelligence around skills and capabilities will actually move a lot faster.
Okay. So your point is, you don't think we have it wrong, but if there's a mismatch with your organization, stay close to it, see how the data evolves, and you'll be able to course correct.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm really excited to talk to you today about, in general, the skill-based organization. And let's zoom out for a bit first, because you're one of the few HR professionals that has it in his title, the skill-based organization. So it's very explicitly positioned at Merck. But I'm curious, if we think about the skills transformation in general, what do you think it means to become a skill-based organization? Why has it come up now, and why is it that important?
I would say overall, the idea of skills isn't new. It's been in the HR and L&D space for decades. Previously, it was around the ideas of competencies. There are these very heavy, labor-intensive ways to try to understand, employees and talent on the ground. So to the point that I made earlier about we're in this era of rapid change, in essence, skills now has a little bit more weight and a little bit more interest, because when you think about the way that the world is working and the nature of the skills and capabilities that are actually needed to execute on tomorrow's problems, we don't even know exactly what all those things are yet. So when you start looking at the understanding of how do you implement dexterity, looking at skills from a data lens and thinking about that as an input to help you better understand and know your talent, for you to be able to better grow that talent for whatever tomorrow's needs are from your business lens, and then to be able to connect your talent from an opportunity perspective, putting them in the right places for the right work. That's really becoming very, very critical for most industries and most every market. And then you overlay the implementation of AI in the context of doing work. Constant change. So the more we're able to start to think about becoming, I used skills based as a very delicate term. I mean, it's kind of a hot phrase. I think it's a bit of a blanket statement because I don't think any organization, its basis will be skills. I think it's about becoming more skill intelligent and skill informed.
Yeah.
Because that having that information is what will allow you to execute with dexterity for the future of your business and also for the future of your talent.
Yeah. But this is it has been around for a long time, the skills topic, but it's really come in with more momentum given new innovations, giving new technologies. What would you say to people, to organizations that say, let's not do this right now, let's wait a little bit, let's see how the early adopters play around with it, and we'll jump on this later?
I think if you're thinking in that way, you will already be left behind.
Okay.
I think every organization, no matter size and scale, should think about the opportunity that you just have to start. Because the most important thing from my purview around skills transformation as a capability within an organization is the mindset of thinking about your talent from a capabilities lens versus thinking about just a world of jobs and roles. Because part of what a lot of our talent looks for in today's world of work is access to opportunities. And one of the ways you can get access and understanding of those opportunities is to have a language of skills, both as a currency for employees, but then also as an input and a currency for the business so that they can make talent investment decisions in the right way.
And you talk about just get started as a trigger for organizations to see the urgency and to get on this now. I'm curious, what were some of the business triggers for looking into those problems? What's the connection to the overall business strategy?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think the important thing to emphasize is that skills-driven work works at its best when it's tied to the business strategy. So when I think about the hierarchy of skills intelligence, ultimately skills intelligence is powering talent strategy. And then talent strategy should have a direct connection to business strategy. So when you think about what's happening in my current organization, there was always a business trigger for each one of those initiatives. So in relation to like skills first hiring, for an example, there was a pipeline and opportunity challenge where they wanted to diversify pipelines because they were having trouble filling that role with the exact prescriptive skills that they needed. So they wanted to build a deeper pipeline by democratizing, certain factors they were looking for in CVs, such as educational requirements or degree requirements, and looking at the skill as the basis of the work. The other example in relation to the architecture conversation, this was really driven by the need to basically extend a capability across the entire organization. So when you think about like digital data analytics, like those kinds of things, recognizing that those capabilities are useful across the organization in multiple functions. So there was a real investment to cross-functionally come together and define architecture and define those roles and to map what are the critical capabilities of those roles into the job architecture. So those are examples of where the business had an explicit need, and then we backed in the talent strategy to help address that need, and then skills had an input in relation to help drive the outcome.
Okay. And that means that the business is also super collaborative on that end in trying to leverage skills data for those use cases?
Absolutely. And I think part of the work when you start working with skills work is part education, but definitely having that sponsorship in relation to articulating sort of, if the business wants this outcome, here are some things that have to be true in order to help get that outcome, and in order to help use skills as an input toward that outcome. So it doesn't come without its change management and the idea that there's a mindset shift that has to happen in traditional organizational structures in relation to thinking about skills as an input. There are some functions that historically I've worked with that tend to lend themselves better to being more versed with using skills as a currency. So example, like IT, where they're always updating their capabilities to kind of drive business results. Another great example is like marketing and sales, where they're constantly sharpening the sword in relation to their skills and capabilities so that they can close more business, whether it's understanding, their business acumen in relation to their go-to-market products, or if it's honing in on their more durable skills to manage customer relationships, negotiate, and so forth.
Okay. And so there seems to be a great link with the business. There seems to be HR initiatives that are able to drive this. But I can imagine it's a continuous project in keeping the momentum. So I'm curious about your learnings and your advice on selling internally, because this is very much a selling journey, right? Yep. It's not intuitive to the business. It's new, or at the very least, it's becoming more easy to scale.
Yep.
So what are you doing to sell this narrative in the organization?
I would say, going back to a comment I made previously, is that the idea that this is a transformation and it's a journey and it isn't a project. Like, yes, you start with projects to prove the value proposition, but a big part of that is what I tend to look for are those hero cases, whereas if you are able to connect with the business and to prove that value, is then like, how can you then get the business to start to showcase the value around the skills work? And when you have that partnership, it starts to break down silos around actually leveraging these kinds of capabilities to drive results. But it definitely isn't a one and done project, but you do have to start somewhere, and where you may have to start is with a pilot or have that project logic. But I would activate that project logic, with the understanding that this is a build up to something that's greater and more sustainable, and something that you'll continue to revisit and build on over time.
And we talked a lot about the stakeholder management piece, which is really important to try and get started. What's also important, and what seems to be perceived as the biggest hurdle, is getting the data. So I'm curious, how are you trying to get the skills data in the first place right now at Merck? And what do you see as some of the opportunities, some of the challenges currently?
Well, this is a very interesting time. I mean, when you think about the work that you all do and other providers are now providing capabilities where you can look across systems and tools to start to leverage AI and emerging technologies to infer some of that directional information. And I think that's a really powerful approach, whereas, in previous times it was a lot harder to do. You had to be a little bit more boots on the ground and get that information from focus groups and other very sort of tactical interventions. But now with AI and other emerging models, you can scrape data and look at it at scale across not only internal information like employee records, but also external information. And I think when you think about the combination of all those variables, that's fit for your organization, it's allowing you to have a point of view around the data that then your leaders and stakeholders can react to with some level of improved confidence. So it's progress over perfection. And more now there are tools available like with what you offer, that's helping power these kinds of capabilities in the kind of work that I do.
Yeah. Is it then clear who owns that data and maintains it? Because that is often perceived as a big piece of work. Like, let's say you have the data, great, but the shelf life is shortening of skills data, so maintenance is important. Who owns that?
It's a great question. I think that varies depending on the maturity of your organization and the type of organization. I'm a big proponent of having some kind of governance structure. So I think about governance in like a 3-tiered stack. One at the bottom level, it's like operational, and best practice for me from my lens is that operational governance, meaning the people who are doing it, who are on the ground, is a shared responsibility between functions that tend to use the data. So like global learning, workforce analytics, potentially global talent, again, depending on your use cases. And then you have that kind of tactical middle, which may be a combination of some functional leaders and maybe even some committees that are giving you insight at scale around what are the trends happening in the business. And then at the top level is your more strategic, because to the point you made earlier about staying aligned with the business, and even the point that you made earlier about, the fact that we have to showcase and share and help connect those dots. I think having that strategic governance and a platform to be able to provide insights on ascending skills, descending skills, snapshots, things like that becomes really important for the buy-in, because the last point I'll make around that is you may have the data, but you may not have the processes and the tools and the systems that support it yet. But if you have a starting point of having it, you can then start to evangelize, to think about the ways to use it and how it can optimize and either create efficiency gains or productivity gains, again, from that business lens, and even thinking about the employee in that context as well. If it's giving them access to more inputs for personalized learning, when you think about the connection of this kind of data to things like talent marketplaces, it becomes a very, very powerful tool that can facilitate a lot of strategic initiatives.
Yeah, and I'd love to double click on that talent marketplace initiative, because that's often one of the most intuitive ones.
Yep.
I mean, towards the business, it's all about filling vacancies as fast as possible to reduce time to hire. And addressing the internal talent pool can really help there. But what is Merck's vision currently for a talent marketplace, and how does it change career mobility as it stands today?
Again, I think every organization is a little bit different in their value prop, but when you think about a talent marketplace in general as a tool and an ecosystem that democratizes access and provides insight to opportunity, I think it's very powerful for just about any organization. And from the Merck lens, I see it and position it, and there's alignment that the marketplace is a way to help further facilitate talent growth and ownership in your own development. So there have been a number of initiatives and campaigns around that idea that you are the owner of your career growth and your career opportunity. And a marketplace is just another incentive for people to take action against that idea from a data-driven lens. And even when I further think about the business value of insight, because that's ultimately what an organization is looking for, is insight. Insight to me about talent readiness, talent supply and demand is actually a formula. Part of that formula is understanding the supply and what skills your employees have. And a marketplace can be another great lever to stress test that understanding, because people now have incentive to want to keep their information up to date, current, and relevant, because it's driving growth for them. While on the other side of that coin, the organization can then start to think about, well, what is my demand, and what are the critical skills and capabilities I need now, and then what are those critical skills and capabilities I need for the future, both near and long term, and how can I use the marketplace as a tool to socialize those needs, so I'm getting the right talent to the right opportunities.
Yeah. Have you come across any resistance on that idea across your career, like the concept of internal mobility?
Yes. I think it depends, because one, I can give an example of a challenge is that when you talk about the mindset shift of mobility as an imperative for the business, when you think about certain personas, when you're working through skills transformation, the middle manager is really, really critical for supporting mobility for employees and encouraging their growth and development. I've worked in scenarios where the perception of talent and talent ownership was actually misaligned between the business and managers, where managers had that perception of, this is my talent. And so they would do a bit of talent hoarding. And so there was like indirect resistance around that idea, because there were lots of questions around, well, how do I get the work done? How do I get my deliverables executed if I'm encouraging, my employees to navigate to other roles and other opportunities? And this is where change management, the culture, organizational readiness, and that transparency becomes really, really important to allow those that are driving the results to feel like they are supported and they understand the value.
Yeah. I want to, we talked a lot about very critical challenges in skill-based journeys, and it aligns a lot with a report that Workday came out with recently, where they surveyed lots of business leaders on the challenges in becoming skills first. And we touched upon resistance to change, we touched upon aligning skills data to business objectives, but the actual first challenge that was mentioned is the time to reskill employees. And this ties very much back to how you deal with AI and AI capabilities improving in employees' profile. How does Merck see this playing out currently, the AI augmented super workers, so to speak, and how can your initiative tie into that?
I think thinking about the impacts of AI is always a really, really important question for any organization at this point. And for those that aren't familiar, the idea of the super worker, the way I look at it is, when you think about it, it's not about technology replacing you. It's about how can technology enhance your human outcomes. So really, each organization has its responsibility to think about what are the critical tasks in a role or an opportunity for the work. What elements of those tasks that may be low order can we start to use AI and other emerging technologies to either, to help automate? And then as a result of that, how are we right skilling our employees to engage with emerging technology and to understand how to use those outputs to make more human focused decisions? So when you look at it in that construct, the end state of human AI relationship is to allow employees to have more capacity. And if they have more capacity, and you think about the job design in that context, then that capacity can be used for upskilling and right skilling in a meaningful way. And as an organization, and I think every organization, we're definitely starting to look at, like, what does that look like in relation to the ratios, and how are we starting to think about, how does the work look different with AI as a support? And then different personas are going to have different kinds of use cases. You can think of your personas as the individual contributor, or the manager, or the leader of functions, and they're going to engage with it in different ways. But I think the formula is still the same, is taking that lens of how can AI augment and take over lower order tasks to create more capacity for higher order activities, of which upskilling and reskilling should be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been a part of several organizations where skills are being looked at more concretely. But a lot of our listeners might be quite new to this journey and might be rather skills curious. Could you speak a little bit to their perspective in seeing this all pan out? They see the early adopters going at it. They see them innovating already. We talked about the urge of getting started with this. What would you say, putting yourself, let's say, in the shoes of a 15,000 employee organization, just starting to implement an employee experience layer, a talent marketplace, as we mentioned, but very new in the skills data piece? How would you advise them to avoid the traps early on in getting started with this?
I would think there's an advantage of being a little lighter and leaner, because sometimes when you think of larger organizations, the advantage is that they have budget, they have interest, but you also have a process disadvantage, because where you have to often re-engineer quite a bit in order to make skills activities actually work from a people perspective, from a process perspective, from a technology perspective. And I would say anyone who is a little newer and they're starting a little leaner, I would really think about the people and that value prop, and make sure that you have like that business alignment around the utility of using skills or building this skills foundation, and then start to think about how that may impact your processes, but think about the value prop for how it impacts those processes. Again, speaking the language of the business, it's either cost saves, efficiency gains. You're either closing some kind of talent shortage gap. You may potentially help an engagement gap. So really thinking and framing the value in the language of the business outcome is really, really critical in that way. And then last but not least, the idea of technology. I would say you don't lead with technology, but I'd be remiss to say that if you have the opportunity to think about the technology early, before you have too many tools doing all of the same things, I think it's imperative to really understand for your organization, what are they using skills for? And then if you can get alignment with either your IT functions or the functions that may get the most advantage out of skills data, like learning, for example, or global talent, or maybe even potentially workforce analytics, and just create those harmonies, I think you can find a tool that has enough dexterity to grow with you as you grow with your strategy around skills.
I like the fact that you touched on tools going out into the market looking for innovations. Often that's where a lot of the confusion starts for organizations. If you have somewhat of an idea what might drive the value for anything skill-based, and you go out in the market and let's say you're on a conference, there's lots of inputs.
Yep.
And there's lots of narratives that sound similar. How did you navigate the vendor space or even the consultancy space in looking for support?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a moving target. It always is a moving target. I mean, as you go up in ranks or up in your career or even in size of organization, you often get shiny object syndrome. It's like, hey, what's the next cool thing that looks flashy? But I would say the way I kind of look at it is I try to look at vendors and their value proposition and what they drive to market in relation to either business alignment or employee experience. So I think it's really, really critical for all those that are listening to think like a business leader. And data is important. Data matters. And I know that skills data in of itself is a new space. When you think about it compared to like financial markets and financial data, it's pretty stable, it's pretty trusted. People know how it works. I would say that I lead from the lens of how well a vendor works with data to help it make sense to drive the outcomes. And that's one of the big tenets for me, because you can have a great UI, you could have a lot of great promises, but if the data doesn't work properly or it doesn't connect with the systems that you need it to help drive the outcomes you want to drive, then it's going to have diminishing returns over time.
Yeah. And we talked a lot about the business lens and stakeholders from a leadership or management point of view. But in the end, it comes down to the employee. Yep. Our purpose at TechWolf is also help every person flourish at work. We see at the same time your point about the AI super worker, but we see lots of companies going for a bit of a more strong viewpoint on that. Yep. And more looking at, hey, you're either with this movement or you're out. or this might at least be the worry from the employee point of view. So what advice do you have for employees today who feel they're falling behind?
I think there are a couple of notes here. I'll start with the organization and then I'll go to the employee.
Yeah.
From an organization lens, what I tend to see is I think there might be an over-indexing around how AI can save cost or how AI can maybe replace some capabilities. And there's an opportunity for when you think about your talent and not allowing your talent to feel alienated. It's more about how is AI helping my employee drive results? These are like two sides of the same coin. And when you hear a lot of what you read in the market and where employees may feel concerned is because they see all the hype and the flash around how AI is taking away certain things and not about how it's actually adding to how people can work faster, work smarter, do more with less. So I implore any organization strategists who are doing this kind of work to start to think about that whole picture and how that picture resonates with your employee audience. And from an employee lens, I look at it as an opportunity to the points that I made earlier around data as an input. I think when you think about the changes around the use of AI and other kinds of things in relation to how work is fundamentally just shifting, I think you have to look at your skill set and think about what are the skills that I'm investing in that will really drive the most value and the most sustainability for me as an employee so that I have the most leverage. Even in my book, I talk about the idea of skills no longer being in the realm of being hard skills versus soft skills, but this idea of skills actually being durable versus perishable. And part of the analogy to simply think about it that resonates for me is that your durable skills are like your toolbox. You think about you move into an apartment or you move into a house, there are certain tools that you have like hammers, nails, screwdrivers that you're going to use over and over again. And those skills, ironically, even though we're in this intelligence age of work, they're very human-centered. It's all about learning dexterity, adaptability, emotional intelligence. These kinds of skills from reports and research over and over are honing in on very human-centered skills that are the most durable. And then you have your perishable skills. Perishable skills, to me, you need them. They're still rare and valuable, but I think of them like groceries. Groceries you eat. You need them to sustain, but eventually they expire. So when you think about skills as durable versus perishable, then you can start to make really high-value investment decisions on where you need to upskill for what you want to do next. And that kind of logic is what I would recommend for employees to, in any organization, to start to think about, like, what are the skills that I need today for my role? What is AI and emerging technology doing to reshape and recast, the role or the domain that I'm in? And then what skills do I need to learn in order to stay relevant so that I have leverage? And then of those skills, which ones are more durable versus which ones are more perishable? And how do I invest my time into making sure I have the right stack for me?
And then from a strategist point of view, let's say you start with skills data, but you get a headwind from employees saying, hey, you're looking in all these data sources, you're inferring skills. How can you give us a signal, or please give us a signal that you won't use this just to plan layoffs?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. And my recommendation and my perspective is that organizations have a social responsibility to be transparent in relation to how they're gathering data and how they're using data. I have the point of view as a leader in this space that using this data should be a do no harm. That, again, it is an input. It doesn't mean you're making a decision from it. You're just providing visibility into it. And you're providing visibility into it to the employee, and then also, for the business that may need it as an element of information that they need to make investment decisions.
Yeah, cool. In your article that you wrote about this topic, about skills becoming outdated,
Yep.
you also talk about your own skills becoming outdated. What did you do to stay ahead there?
I think to the story that I offered you earlier, what I started to recognize in my previous roles was that the problems I was trying to solve, I recognized that there was so much changing in the market, and that I didn't have the answer straight away. And this is what actually got me into the whole space of thinking about future work, thinking about skills-based and skills-driven strategies, because I had to actually re-engineer a whole learning function. And then I started thinking about that learning function in relation to what are the skills, capabilities, processes and technologies that will allow this function to show up for the business, and what are the talents that my people will need to actually execute against that. And as a leader, I kind of feel like, and as a strategist, you have to kind of take those ideas and reflect them on yourself, and you have to embody that information. So for me, it took me down a path of looking again at durability versus perishability. If I wanted to get into new markets and think about emerging technologies, where did I have to upskill, and what in that upskilling was perishable, meaning near term and going to change, and then what in that upskilling and right skilling was durable. And then I took that and applied that to my own development plan and my own growth plan. And then I started also navigating opportunities and creating opportunities that would allow me to actually execute that plan through strategic pivots, through working in roles within organizations, through taking on projects that were both sponsored or that I would recommend, all in the spirit of making sure I was providing myself with the right opportunities to learn and grow.
Awesome. And in the spirit of giving our audience places to go and learn more about this space, what are some of the companies that you look up to in terms of the way they're developing a skill-based strategy? And this can be companies you previously worked at, or it can be just companies you keep an eye out, people you talk to, etc.
I think there are so many different lessons that can be learned across sectors. I think Accenture is doing very interesting work in their proposition. Any professional services organization by default, their knowledge capital is what they go to market with. So I used to be a former Accenture employee as well, but I think there are other organizations like one of my former organizations, Salesforce. They do a lot of interesting work in the AI space, and thinking about skills as well. I would say another organization that does pretty interesting work is Unilever.
Okay.
They've been doing this kind of work for a while in a lot of different capacities. More recently, what I've become a big fan of is one of my peers, Sandra, and she works as a chief scientist for EPAM, and I'm a huge fan of that organization in the fact that it's an AI consulting company that has been drinking its own champagne in relation to building its own infrastructure from scratch around skills intelligence, through their entire functional model. And they've been doing this, quietly for decades. And now I love seeing that they can share practices and understandings, because every organization is different, but those lessons learned and that tacit knowledge, I think, is really, really inspiring.
Yeah. And talking about sharing and sharing knowledge across organizations, I'd love for you to ask a question to our next guest, which is a habit that we do on this podcast. Yeah. So it can be about topics of today, it can be about something else, anything you're curious about.
I always have a question around when it comes to this work, to whoever the next guest is, it's like, how do you navigate change and adoption when it comes to driving skills initiatives in your organization? From my own lens, in having done this work for the last few years, I find that the change piece is always the area where I always wished I could do more ahead of implementing the opportunities. So I'm really curious as to what the next guest will say about that.
And I'm sure they'll have a great answer. So let's see how they roll with that. Thank you so much, Kason, for the conversation.
Yep.
I hope we do this more, and keen to follow your journey as it evolves.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.
All right.